A new nurse joined a large city hospital, which had just undergone a massive renovation. There were now shiny new facilities that were separated into different wards. The nurse was excited to start working in this modern environment, but she was a little disappointed when she was told she'd be working nights in Ward 13. Turns out the entire ward had been abandoned for years. Nobody worked there at night, and hardly anyone used it during the day. The head nurse explained that many years ago, several patients died in this ward in mysterious circumstances. No one knew what had happened to them, so the ward was sealed off from the rest of the hospital. Rumors spread like wildfire among the staff, with some claiming that the ward was haunted. Some nurses even quit rather than working there. The head nurse told our new colleague that she should keep an open mind and not believe everything she heard. She then started working her first night shift in the creepy old ward. As soon as the sun went down, she felt the atmosphere change. At first, it was subtle, but soon she couldn't shake this feeling that she was being watched. Despite trying to ignore it, the feeling intensified. As she made her way through the darkened corridors, she noticed that the bed curtains were moving slightly. She stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding. She could have sworn she heard a woman's voice. But when she turned around, there was no one there. Was she imagining things? She tried to convince herself that there was a logical explanation. Perhaps the air conditioning was making the curtains move, or maybe it was just playing tricks on her, but the voice still echoed in her ears. With a shaky hand, she pulled back the curtain to find an empty bed. She blinked, trying to clear her eyes. It was then that she noticed the faint sound of a drip. She rushed over to the bed and checked the forebag. It was almost empty. But how could that be? She had checked it just a few minutes ago. She quickly adjusted the drip and moved on. Now, she understood why the staff avoided this place at night. However, she wouldn't let fear get the better of her. After all, she was a nurse. Her job was to care for patients, no matter how scary the ward was. So she finished her rounds, checking on the other patients and adjusting their drips. The hours passed slowly, each tick-tock of the clock seeming like a hammer blow in the eerie silence. Then it happened again. A soft whisper, like the rustle of silk against silk, brushed against her ear. She froze, unable to move or speak. It felt as if someone was standing right next to her. But when she turned around, there was no one there. Just then, she noticed movement in the corner of her eye. A shadow seemed to drift past her, disappearing into the gloom. Fear threatened to engulf her, but she pushed it down. She told herself it was just a trick of the light. Still, she couldn't shake off the creepy feeling that she was being watched. This ward may be old and dilapidated, she thought, but it's just a building. There are no ghosts here. As the night wore on, strange things began to happen around her. She found patients who were supposed to be resting calmly asleep, their chests rising and falling steadily. What was even stranger, she had checked on them only moments before, and they were wide awake. And then there was the matter of the empty beds. She would round up to a set of twins only to find them both missing. And then there would be the sound of whispers, soft, indiscernible voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The closer it got to midnight, the more intense these phenomena became. By now, she was truly terrified. She wanted to scream, to run away, but she couldn't. She was frozen in place, trapped in a nightmare. Just as the clock tower chimed 12 times, signaling the stroke of midnight, the room was plunged into darkness. The emergency generator had kicked in automatically. In the sudden blackness, she could hear the panicked cries of a patient. She rushed to his bedside, her heart pounding. "Help," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They're coming for me." Before she could respond, the bed beside his suddenly lurched upwards. The empty bed. She had checked it only moments ago. Now it was occupied by a shadowy figure that seemed to rise out of the darkness. It was tall and gaunt, with long, greasy hair covering its face. The patient screamed, thrashing about in his bed as the figure slowly rose from the bed. It turned towards her, its face hidden in the shadows. Then it began to walk towards her, dragging itself closer and closer. Paralyzed with fear, she could only watch as the figure approached. The patient's screams filled the room, echoing her own terror. She wanted to flee, but her feet felt glued to the floor. As the figure loomed over her, she closed her eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But it never came. Instead, she heard a loud crash, and then silence. Gathering her courage, she opened her eyes to see the figure lying on the ground at her feet. Had it vanished? She cautiously approached the figure, her eyes wide with fear. As she reached out a trembling hand, the face beneath the tangled hair came into view. It was a woman, her eyes wide open and staring. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The woman's skin was as white as snow, and her lips and fingernails were stained a deep, horrifying red. She ran from the ward, bumping into people, knocking over equipment. She didn't care. She needed to get away from that place, from the ghosts. When she finally burst through the front doors, she collapsed on the pavement outside, gasping for breath. People stared at her, but she didn't care. She just needed to get home. She managed to get herself to sleep, but her dreams were filled with the whispers and the moans of the dead. She could feel their cold hands dragging her down into the darkness. The next morning, her colleagues were shocked to find her in the staff room, unconscious and whispering numbers. They called the paramedics, who took her to hospital. She spent several days in a daze, unable to speak or eat. Then slowly, very slowly, she began to wake up. When she was well enough, she was interviewed by the hospital staff and the police, but she couldn't tell them anything about what had happened in the hospital. All she remembered was the horrifying sight of the ghost and the moans of the dead. She did, however, say something shocking. She talked about a patient on bed 7 waiting for her. She kept saying that she had to go back to finish her shift, that bed 7 was waiting for her. The staff were horrified. Bed 7 was one of the sealed-off beds in the abandoned ward, the one where the ghost had taken the form of the woman with blood on her fingernails. The doctors tried to convince her that she had just imagined it all, that there were no ghosts, but she insisted that this wasn't the case. She talked about the other patients and how they had welcomed her to the ward. After spending a week in the hospital, she was well enough to go home. But she never went back to work. Her colleagues never saw her again. To this day, the hospital remains a mystery. No one knows what really happened to her or why she was chosen. But the staff still talk in hushed voices about the nurse who disappeared into the night. And the chilling words she had spoken, "Bed 7 is waiting for me tonight."